She Children's Classics, a classic children's story, specially selected by the editors of She magazine.
Anne of Green Gables by M Montgomery. Mrs. Rachel Lynde lived just where the Avonlea main road dipped into a little hollow, and found abundant time to sit for hours at her kitchen window, keeping a sharp eye on the main road that crossed the hollow and wound up the steep red hill beyond. There are plenty of people in Avonlea who can attend closely to their neighbor's business by dint of neglecting their own. But Mrs. Rachel Lynde was one of those capable creatures who can manage their own concerns and those of other folk into the bargain. She was a notable housewife. She ran the sewing circle, helped run the Sunday school, and was the strongest prop of the Church Aid Society and Foreign Missions Auxiliary. She was sitting there one afternoon in early June and saw Matthew Cuthbert placidly driving over the hollow and up the hill. Now, where was Matthew going, and why was he going there? Mrs. Rachel decided to step over to Green Gables after tea and find out. The kitchen at Green Gables was a cheerful apartment, and here sat Marilla Cuthbert knitting. Marilla was a tall, thin woman. Her dark hair showed some gray streaks. She looked like a woman of narrow experience and rigid conscience, which she was. But there was a saving something about her mouth which, if it had been ever so slightly developed, might have been considered indicative of a sense of humor. Mrs. Rachel rapped smartly at the kitchen door and stepped in when bidden to do so.
Good evening, Rachel. How are all your folks?
We're all pretty well. I was kind of afraid you weren't, though, when I saw Matthew starting off today. I thought maybe he was going to the doctor's.
No, I'm quite well. Matthew went to Bright River. We're getting a little boy from an orphan asylum in Nova Scotia, and he's coming on the train tonight.
Are you in earnest, Marilla?
Yes, of course.
What on earth put such a notion into your head?
Well, we've been thinking about it for some time. Mrs. Spencer said she was going to get a girl from the asylum in Hopetown. We thought we'd get a boy. Matthew is getting on in years. He's 60, and he isn't so spry as he once was. His heart troubles him a good deal. We asked Mrs. Spencer to bring us a smart, likely boy of about 10.
Well, Marilla, I think you're doing a mighty risky thing.
I don't deny there's something in what you say, Rachel, but Matthew was terrible set on it.
Mrs. Rachel would have liked to stay until Matthew came home, but she took herself away, somewhat to Marilla's relief, for she felt her doubts and fears reviving. Meanwhile, Matthew Cuthbert and the sorrel mare jogged over the 8 pretty miles to Bright River. Matthew was an odd-looking personage, with an ungainly figure and long iron-gray hair that touched his stooping shoulders, and a full, soft brown beard, which he had worn since he was 20. When he reached Bright River, there was no sign of any train, the only living creature in sight being a girl who was sitting on a pile of shingles. Matthew asked the station master if the train would be along soon.
The train has been and gone. But there was a passenger dropped off for you, a little girl.
Well, I'm not expecting a girl. Yes, a boy I've come for. Yeah, Mrs. Spencer was to bring him over from Nova Scotia for me.
Oh, I guess there's some mistake. Mrs. Spencer came off the train with that girl and gave her into my charge. She said you would be along for her.
Well, I don't understand.
Well, you'd better question the girl. I dare say she'll be able to explain. She's got a tongue of her own, that's certain.
Matthew shuffled gently down the platform towards her. A child of about 11, garbed in a very ugly dress of yellowish wincey. Extending down her back were 2 braids of thick, decidedly red hair. Her face was small, white, and thin, also much freckled. The big eyes were full of spirit and vivacity. The mouth was sweet-lipped and expressive. The forehead was broad and full. In short, no commonplace soul inhabited the body of this stray woman-child of whom shy Matthew Cuthbert was so ludicrously afraid.
I suppose you're Mr. Matthew Cuthbert of Green Gables. I'm very glad to see you. I was beginning to be afraid you weren't coming for me.
I'm sorry I was late. Come along, give me your bag.
Oh, I can carry it. I've got all my worldly goods in it, but it isn't heavy. I'm very glad you've come. Oh, it seems so wonderful that I'm going to live with you and belong to you. I've never belonged to anybody.
With this, Matthew's companion stopped talking, because they had reached the buggy. Not another word did she say until they were driving down a steep little hill, the banks fringed with blossomy wild fruit trees.
Isn't that beautiful? What did that tree, all white and lacy, make you think of?
Well, no, I don't know.
Why, a bride all in white. I do hope someday I shall have a white dress. I've never had a pretty dress in my life. Oh, I just love it here already. Am I talking too much? People are always telling me so.
Oh, you can talk as much as you like. I don't mind.
Oh, I'm so glad. I know you and I are going to get along together fine. It's such a relief to talk when one wants to. Oh, Mr. Cuthbert! Oh, Mr. Cuthbert!
They had rounded a bend and found themselves in a road completely arched over with huge apple trees. Overhead was one long canopy of snowy, fragrant bloom.
Oh, Mr. Cuthbert, that place we came through, that white place, what was it?
Well, you must mean the avenue.
Oh, it was wonderful. They shouldn't call that lovely place the avenue. They should call it the Way of White Delight. Oh, look, isn't that pretty?
Yeah, that's Barry's Pond.
Oh, I don't like that name either. I shall call it the Lake of Shining Water. But why do people call it Barry's Pond?
I reckon because Mr. Barry lives up there in that house.
Has Mr. Barry any little girls?
He's got one about 11. Her name is Diana.
Oh, what a perfectly lovely name.
Well, we're pretty near home now. That's Green Gables over...
Oh, don't tell me. Let me guess. That's it, isn't it?
Well, now you've guessed it. But I reckon Mrs. Spencer described it so as you could tell.
No, really, she didn't. But just as soon as I saw it, I felt it was home.
With a sigh of rapture, she relapsed into silence. Matthew stirred uneasily. He felt glad that it would be Marilla and not he who would have to tell this waif of the world that the home she longed for was not to be hers after all. The yard was quite dark as they turned into it. Matthew lifted Anne to the ground, and holding tightly to the carpet bag which contained all her worldly goods, she followed him into the house. Marilla came briskly forward as Matthew opened the door. But when her eyes fell on the odd little figure in the stiff, ugly dress, she stopped short in amazement.
Matthew Cuthbert? Who's that? Where is the boy?
There wasn't any boy. There was only her.
No boy? We sent word to Mrs. Spencer to bring a boy.
Well, she didn't. She brought her, and I had to bring her home. She couldn't be left there no matter where the mistake had come in.
You don't want me because I'm not a boy. Nobody ever did want me. I might have known it was all too beautiful to last.
Well, there's no need to cry so about it.
Yes, there is need. You would cry too if you were an orphan and had come to a place you thought was going to be home and found they didn't want you. Well, this is the most tragical thing that's ever happened to me.
Well, don't cry anymore. We're not going to turn you out of doors tonight. What's your name?
Anne Shirley. Please call me Anne, spelled with an E.
Very well, then, Anne, spelled with an E. Can you tell us how this mistake came to be made? Were there no boys at the asylum?
Oh, yes, but Mrs. Spencer said distinctly that you wanted a girl about 11 years old. And Matron said she thought I would do. You don't know how delighted I was. Oh, Mr. Cuthbert, why didn't you tell me at the station consolation you didn't want me and leave me there. If I hadn't seen the White Way of Delight and the Lake of Shining Waters, it wouldn't be so hard.
What on earth does she mean?
She's just referring to some conversation we had on the road.
If I was very beautiful, would you keep me?
No. We want a boy to help Matthew on the farm. A girl would be no use to us. Come on now, let's sit down. Supper's ready. You're not eating anything.
I can't. I'm in the depths of despair. Everything is extremely nice, but I still cannot eat.
I guess she's tired. Best put her to bed, Marilla.
Marilla lighted a candle and told Anne to follow her. She set the candle down on a 3-legged corner table in the little gable chamber.
I suppose you have a nightgown?
Yes, I have 2.
Well, undress as quick as you can and go to bed. Good night.
How can you call it a good night when you know it must be the very worst night I've ever had?
Marilla went slowly downstairs and proceeded to wash the supper dishes.
Well, this is a pretty kettle of fish. One of us will have to drive over and see Mrs. Spencer tomorrow, that's certain. The girl will have to be sent back to the asylum.
Yes, I suppose so.
You suppose so? Don't you know it?
Well, no, she's a real nice little thing, Marilla. It's a kind of pity to send her back when she's so set on staying here.
Matthew Cuthbert, you don't mean to say you think we ought to keep her?
Well, no, I suppose not. Not exactly.
I should say not. What good would she be to us?
Well, we might be some good to her. I'm going to bed.
To bed Matthew went. And to bed went Marilla, frowning most resolutely. And upstairs in the east gable, a lonely, heart-hungry, friendless child cried herself to sleep. It was broad daylight when Anne awoke. With a bound, she was out of bed, pushed up the sash window and gazed out, lost to everything until she was startled by a hand on her shoulder.
You'd better get dressed and come downstairs. Breakfast is waiting. I suppose I can have the mare and buggy this afternoon, Matthew?
Yep.
I'm going to drive over to White Sands and settle this thing. I'll take Anne with me, and Mrs. Spencer will probably make arrangements to send her back to Nova Scotia at once.
Matthew hitched the sorrel into the buggy in due time, and Marilla and Anne set off.
Tell me what you know about yourself, where you were born and how old you are.
I was 11 last March, and I was born in Bolingbroke, Nova Scotia. My father's name was Walter Shirley, and he was a teacher. My mother's name was Bertha. My mother died of a fever when I was 3 months old, and my father died 4 days afterwards. That left me an orphan, and folks were at their wits' end what to do with me. Finally, a Mrs. Thomas said she'd take me. I lived with them until I was 8 years old. I helped to look after the 4 Thomas children. Then Mr. Thomas was killed falling under a train. His mother offered to take Mrs. Thomas and the children, but she didn't want me.
What happened then?
Mrs. Hammond from up the river came down and said she'd take me because I was handy with children. Mrs. Hammond had 8 children. I lived with them for over 2 years, and then Mr. Hammond died. Mrs. Hammond went to the States, and I had to go to the asylum at Hopeton because nobody would take me.
Did you ever go to school?
Not a great deal, but of course I went when I was at the asylum.
Were those women, Mrs. Thomas and Mrs. Hammond, good to you?
Oh, they meant to be. They had a good deal to worry them, you know, but I feel sure they meant to be.
Marilla asked no more questions. Pity was suddenly stirring in her heart for the child. What a starved, unloved life she had had. A life of drudgery and poverty and neglect. No wonder she had been so delighted at the prospect of a real home. It was a pity she had to be sent back. What if she, Marilla, should indulge Matthew's unaccountable whim and let her stay? He was set on it, and the child seemed a nice, teachable little thing. The child disturbed her train of thought.
What big house is that just ahead, please?
That's the White Sands Hotel.
I was afraid it might be Mrs. Spencer's place. I don't want to get there. Somehow it will seem like the end of everything.
Get there they did, however. Mrs. Spencer came to the door.
Dear, dear, you're the last folks I was looking for today.
Oh, the fact is, there's been a queer mistake somewhere. We told your brother, Robert, we wanted a boy.
Robert sent word down by his daughter, and she said you wanted a girl.
It was our own fault. We should have come to you ourselves. Anyhow, can we send the child back to the asylum?
I suppose so, but I don't think it'll be necessary. Mrs. Blewett was saying how she wished for a girl to help her.
Marilla had heard of Mrs. Blewett. Discharged servant girls told fearsome tales of her temper and stinginess.
And if there isn't Mrs. Blewett coming up the lane, we can settle the matter right away. Good afternoon, Mrs. Blewett. There's been a mistake about this girl. They wanted a boy. I think she'll be just the thing for you.
How old are you, and what's your name?
Anne Shirley, and I'm 11 years old.
Well, if I take you, I'll expect you to earn your keep. Yes, I might as well take her. Well, I don't know. I just came over to find out how the mistake had occurred. I think I'd better take her home again and talk it over with Matthew. If we make up our mind not to keep her, we'll send her over tomorrow night. Will that suit you, Mrs. Blewett? I suppose it'll have to. Now, Mrs. Spencer, can we go and have a word?
Oh, Miss Cuthbert, did you really say that perhaps you would let me stay at Green Gables?
Yes, you did hear me say just that, and no more. It isn't decided yet.
When they arrived back at Green Gables that evening, Matthew met them in the lane. Marilla said nothing to him until they were both behind the barn milking the cows. Then she briefly told him Anne's history and the result of the interview with Mrs. Spencer.
I wouldn't give a dog I like to that Blewett woman.
I don't fancy her style myself, but it's that or keeping her ourselves. Since you seem to want her, I suppose I'm willing.
Well, now, I reckon you'd come to see it in that light, Marilla.
Mind, Matthew, you're not to go interfering with my methods.
There, Marilla. Only be as good and kind to her as you can, without spoiling her.
Marilla sniffed to express her contempt for Matthew's opinions concerning anything feminine. I won't tell her tonight she can stay, she reflected. She'd be so excited she wouldn't sleep a wink. Marilla did not tell Anne that she was to stay at Green Gables until the next afternoon. During the forenoon, she kept the child busy with various tasks. When Anne had finished washing the dinner dishes, she suddenly confronted Marilla with the air and expression of one desperately determined to learn the worst.
Oh, please, Miss Cuthbert, won't you tell me if you are going to send me away or not? I cannot bear not knowing any longer. Please tell me.
Well, Matthew and I have decided to keep you. That is, if you will try to be a good little girl. Why, child, whatever is the matter?
I'm crying. I can't think why. I'm as glad as can be. I'm so happy. I'll try to be so good.
Sit down on that chair and try to calm yourself. Yes, you can stay here, and we'll try to do right by you.
What am I to call you?
You'll call me just plain Marilla.
It sounds awfully disrespectful to just say Marilla.
I guess there'll be nothing disrespectful in it if you're careful to speak it respectfully.
Do you think I shall ever have a bosom friend in Avonlea?
Diana Barry lives over at Orchard Slope, and she's about your age.
What is Diana like?
Diana is a very pretty girl. She has black eyes and hair and rosy cheeks.
Oh, I'm so glad she's pretty. When I lived with Mrs. Thomas, I used to imagine I had a beautiful bosom friend called Katie Maurice. Then when I went to Mrs. Hammond's, I imagined another friend called Violetta.
You seem to half believe your own imaginations. It'll be well for you to have a real live friend to put such nonsense out of your head.
Anne had been a fortnight at Green Gables before Mrs. Rachel Lynde arrived to inspect her. Mrs. Rachel, to do her justice, was not to blame for this. A severe and unseasonable attack of grippe had confined that good lady to her house. As soon as her doctor had allowed her to put a foot out of doors, she hurried to Green Gables, bursting with curiosity.
I've been hearing some surprising things about you and Matthew.
I don't suppose you are any more surprised than I am myself.
It was too bad there was such a mistake. Couldn't you have sent her back?
We decided not to. Matthew took a fancy to her, and I must say I like her myself.
It's a great responsibility you've taken on yourself. But I don't want to discourage you, I'm sure, Marilla.
I'm not feeling discouraged. I suppose you'd like to see her. I'll call her in.
Anne came running in, but abashed at finding herself in the unexpected presence of a stranger, she halted confusedly inside the door.
Well, they didn't pick you for your looks, that's sure and certain. She's terribly skinny and homely, Marilla. Come here, child, and let me have a look at you. Lawful heart! Did anyone see such freckles? And hair as red as carrots? Come here, child, I say.
Anne came here, but not exactly as Mrs. Rachel expected. With one bound, she crossed the kitchen floor and stood before Mrs. Rachel, her face scarlet with anger, her lips quivering, and her slender body trembling from head to foot.
I hate you! I hate you! I hate you! How dare you call me skinny and ugly? How dare you say I'm freckled and red-headed? You are a rude, impolite, unfeeling woman!
Anne!
How dare you say such things about me? How would you like such things said about you? I'll never forgive you for it! Never, never!
Did anybody ever see such a temper?
Anne, go to your room and stay there until I come up.
Well, I don't envy you your job bringing that up, Marilla.
You shouldn't have twitted her about her looks, Rachel.
Marilla Cuthbert, you don't mean to say that you are upholding her in such a terrible display of temper.
No, I'm not trying to excuse her, and I'll give her a talking to. But you were too hard on her, Rachel.
Well, I see that I shall have to be very careful what I say after this, Marilla.
Whereat Mrs. Rachel swept out and away, and Marilla, with a very solemn face, betook herself to the east gable. Anne was face downward on her bed, crying bitterly.
Anne, get off that bed and listen to what I have to say to you. This is a nice way to behave, Anne. Aren't you ashamed of yourself?
She hadn't any right to call me ugly and red-headed.
You hadn't any right to fly into such a fury and talk the way you did to her. I was ashamed of you, and you have disgraced me.
Just imagine how you would feel if somebody told you to your face that you were skinny and ugly.
I don't say that I think Mrs. Lynde was exactly right in saying what she did to you, Anne. But she was a stranger and an elderly person and my visitor. You must go to her and tell her you are very sorry and ask her to forgive you.
I can never do that. You can punish me any way you like, but I cannot ask Mrs. Lynde to forgive me.
Apologize to Mrs. Lynde you must and shall. And you'll stay in your room until you tell me you are willing to do it.
I shall have to stay here forever then. I'm sorry I vexed you, but I can't imagine telling Mrs. Lynde I'm sorry.
Perhaps your imagination will be in better working order in the morning.
Marilla said nothing to Matthew about the affair that evening, but account had to be made for her absence from the breakfast table, and she told him the whole story.
It's a good thing Rachel Lynde got a calling down.
Matthew Cuthbert. I suppose you'll be saying next she oughtn't to be punished at all.
Well, no, not exactly. But don't be too hard on her.
Breakfast, dinner, and supper were very silent meals. When Marilla went out that evening to bring the cows back, Matthew crept upstairs and tapped on the door of the east gable.
Anne, how are you making it, Anne?
Pretty well. I imagine a good deal.
Well, now, Anne, don't you think you'd better do it and have it over with?
Do you mean apologize to Mrs. Lynde?
Yes, apologize.
I suppose I could, if you really want me to.
Well, no, of course I do.
Very well. I'll tell Marilla as soon as she comes in.
Marilla, upon her return to the house, was agreeably surprised to be told by Anne that she had repented and was ready to apologize. After milking, they walked down the lane together, Marilla triumphant, until they were in the very presence of Mrs. Lynde. Anne suddenly went down on her knees before the astonished Mrs. Lynde.
Oh, Mrs. Lynde, I'm so extremely sorry. I've behaved terribly to you, and I've disgraced Matthew and Marilla. I'm a dreadfully wicked and ungrateful girl. It was very wicked of me to fly into a temper because you told me the truth. My hair is red, and I'm freckled, skinny, and ugly. Oh, Mrs. Lynde, please, please forgive me.
There was no mistaking her sincerity. Both Marilla and Mrs. Lynde recognized its unmistakable ring. However, Marilla understood in dismay that Anne was enjoying her valley of humiliation. Mrs. Lynde did not see this.
There. Get up, child. Of course I forgive you.
Oh, Mrs. Lynde, thank you. You're very kind. May I go into your garden while you and Marilla are talking?
Laws, yes. Run along, child. She's a real odd little thing. On the whole, Marilla, I kind of like her.
Anne was standing in the gable room, looking solemnly at 3 new dresses spread out on the bed. Marilla had made them herself, and they were all made alike. Plain skirts, plain waists, with plain sleeves.
Well, how do you like them?
I'll imagine that I like them.
Oh, I can see you don't like the dresses. What is the matter with them?
I wish you'd made just one of them with puffed sleeves.
Oh, I think they are ridiculous looking.
But I'd rather look ridiculous when everybody else does than plain and sensible all by myself.
Trust you for that. Now, sit down and learn your Sunday school lesson.
The next morning, warnings of a sick headache prevented Marilla from going to Sunday school with Anne, so she told her to call for Mrs. Lynde, who would see she got into the right class. Anne started off, arrayed in stiff black and white sateen. When she reached Mrs. Lynde's house, she found that lady gone. Nothing daunted, Anne proceeded onward to the church alone. She found herself in Miss Rogerson's class, and she felt very miserable. Marilla was anxious to hear all about it.
Well, how did you like Sunday school?
I didn't like it a bit. It was horrid.
Anne Shirley.
I behaved well, just as you told me. Mr. Bell made an awfully long prayer. I would have been dreadfully tired if I hadn't been sitting by the window and imagined all sorts of splendid things.
You shouldn't have done anything of the sort. You should have listened to Mr. Bell.
But he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to God. Well, then they told me to go to Miss Rogerson's class. There were 9 other girls, and they all had puffed sleeves.
You shouldn't have been thinking about sleeves. You should have been attending to the lesson. I hope you knew it.
Oh, yes, and I answered a lot of questions. After Sunday school, I sat in your pew, just as still as I could. It was a very long text, and the sermon was awfully long, too. I didn't think the minister was a bit interesting. I didn't listen to him very much.
Marilla felt helplessly that all this should be sternly reproved, but she was hampered by the fact that some of the things Anne had said were what she had felt deep down in her heart for years. It was the next Friday that Marilla had some news that put Anne into a state of ecstasy.
Diana Barry came home this afternoon. I'm going up to see Mrs. Barry, and if you like, you can come with me and get acquainted with Diana.
Oh, yes, please, Marilla.
I guess Diana will like you well enough. It's her mother you've got to reckon with. You must be well behaved and polite.
Outside in the garden stood Anne and Diana, gazing bashfully at each other over a clump of gorgeous tiger lilies. The Barry garden was a bowery wilderness of flowers which would have delighted Anne's heart at any time less fraught with destiny. At last, clasping her hands, Anne spoke, almost in a whisper.
Oh, Diana, do you think you can like me a little? Enough to be my bosom friend?
Why, I guess so. I'm awfully glad you've come to live at Green Gables. It'll be jolly to have someone to play with.
Will you swear to be my friend forever and ever?
Why? It's dreadfully wicked to swear.
Oh, no, not my kind of swearing. It just means vowing and promising solemnly.
Well, I don't mind doing that. How'd you do it?
We must join hands, so I'll repeat the oath first. I solemnly swear to be faithful to my bosom friend Diana Barry, as long as the sun and moon shall endure. Now you say it, and put my name in.
You're a queer girl, Anne, but I believe I'm going to like you real well.
Diana repeated the oath, and then, when Marilla and Anne went home, she went with them as far as the log bridge. At the brook, they parted with promises to spend the next afternoon together.
Well, did you find Diana a kindred spirit?
Oh, yes! Oh, Marilla, I'm the happiest girl on Prince Edward Island!
Marilla had seen Anne start off to school on the first day of September with many secret misgivings. Anne was such an odd girl. Things went better than Marilla feared, however. Anne came home that evening in high spirits.
I think I'm going to like school here.
I hope you were a good girl.
Indeed I was. I sit with Diana.
That was 3 weeks ago, and now Anne and Diana were tripping happily to school.
I guess Gilbert Blythe will be in school today.
Gilbert Blythe? Isn't it his name that's written up on the porch wall with Julia bells?
Yes.
I should just like to see anybody dare write my name up with a boy's. Not that anybody would.
Nonsense. Charlie Sloane is dead gone on you. He told his mother that you were the smartest girl in school.
I hate Charlie Sloane, but it is nice to keep head of your class.
You'll have Gilbert in your class now, and he's used to being head of his class.
I'm glad. I couldn't really feel proud of keeping head of 9 or 10-year-olds.
Later in class, when Mr. Phillips was in the back of the room, hearing Prissy Andrews' Latin, Diana whispered to Anne that Gilbert was sitting just across the aisle. Anne looked accordingly. Gilbert looked at Anne and winked. Anne thought that unmannerly and bold. It was in the afternoon that things really began to happen. Gilbert was trying to make Anne look at him, and failing utterly. He reached across the aisle, picked up the end of Anne's long red braid, and said in a piercing whisper,
"Carrots, carrots!"
You mean, hateful boy! How dare you! Take that!
Oh, my head!
Anne Shirley, what does this mean?
It was my fault, Mr. Phillips. I teased her.
Anne, go and stand on the platform in front of the blackboard for the rest of the afternoon.
Anne stood there. She did not cry or hang her head. Anger was still too hot in her heart for that. When school was dismissed, Anne marched out with her red head held high. Gilbert tried to apologize, but she swept by disdainfully.
Oh, how could you, Anne?
I shall never forgive Gilbert Blythe.
It is possible the matter might have blown over, but when things begin to happen, they are apt to keep on. On the following day, Mr. Phillips announced before going to dinner that he should expect everyone in their seats when he returned. Anyone late would be punished. All the boys and girls went to Mr. Bell's Spruce Grove as usual, until they heard Jimmy Glover shouting, "Master's coming!" They all raced back, and Anne, who could run like a deer, overtook the boys at the door as Mr. Phillips was hanging up his hat. He didn't want the bother of punishing a dozen pupils, so he looked for a scapegoat.
And so, since you seem to be so fond of boys' company, sit with Gilbert Blythe. Did you hear what I said, Anne?
Yes, sir. But I didn't suppose you really meant it.
I assure you I did. Obey me at once.
Anne rose haughtily, stepped across the aisle, and sat down beside Gilbert. To Anne, this was the end of all things. To be sent to sit with Gilbert Blythe was heaping insult on injury. When school went out, Anne marched to her desk and took everything out.
What are you taking all those things home for, Anne?
I'm not coming back to school anymore.
Just think of all the fun you'll miss.
Diana tried everything she could think of to persuade Anne to change her mind, without avail. Nothing moved Anne in the least. She would not go to school to Mr. Phillips again, and she told Marilla so when she got home.
Nonsense.
It isn't nonsense. I've been insulted.
Insulted fiddlesticks. You'll go to school tomorrow as usual.
Oh, no. I'm not going back, Marilla. I'll learn my lessons at home.
Marilla saw something like unyielding stubbornness looking out of Anne's small face. She resolved wisely to say nothing more, but to see Mrs. Rachel that evening.
I suppose you know what I've come about.
About Anne's fuss in school, I reckon. Tilly Boulder told me all about it.
She declares she won't go back to school. What would you advise, Rachel?
I just humor her a little. It's my belief that Mr. Phillips was in the wrong. The others who were late should have been punished as well. Tilly took Anne's part and said all the scholars did.
Then you really think I'd better let her stay at home?
Yes. Depend on it, Marilla. She'll cool off in a week or two.
Marilla took Mrs. Rachel's advice. Anne learned her lessons at home and played with Diana. But when she met Gilbert Blythe, she passed him with icy contempt. Anne had made up her mind to hate Gilbert to the end of her life. October was a beautiful month at Green Gables. Anne reveled in the world of color about her. One Saturday morning, Marilla called her in.
I'm going to a meeting of the Aid Society this afternoon. You can ask Diana to come over and spend the afternoon with you and have tea here.
Oh, Marilla, how perfectly lovely. It will seem so nice and grown-uppish.
Oh.
Can I use the rosebud spray tea set?
No, indeed. Use the old brown tea set. But you can cut some fruit cake, and there's a bottle half full of raspberry cordial on the second shelf of the sitting room closet that you and Diana can have.
Anne fled down the path to Orchard Slope to ask Diana to tea. Diana came over, looking exactly as it is proper to look when asked out to tea.
How is your mother?
She is very well, thank you. Have you picked many of your apples yet?
Oh, ever so many. Let's go out to the orchard and get some red sweetings.
The orchard proved so delightful that the girls spent most of the afternoon in it, talking as hard as they could. Diana had much to tell Anne of what went on in school. How everybody missed Anne so, and wished she'd come back to school, and Gilbert Blythe. But Anne didn't want to hear about Gilbert Blythe. She jumped up hurriedly and said, suppose they go in and have some raspberry cordial. Anne looked on the second shelf of the pantry, but there was no bottle of raspberry cordial there. Search revealed it away back on the top shelf. Anne put it on a tray and set it on the table with a tumbler.
Now please help yourself, Diana. I don't believe I'll have any just now.
That's awfully nice, Anne. I didn't know raspberry cordial was so nice.
I'm real glad you like it.
The nicest I ever drank. Much nicer than Mrs. Lynde's. It doesn't taste a bit like hers.
I should think Marilla's raspberry cordial would probably be much nicer. Marilla is a famous cook. She's trying to teach me to cook, but I assure you, Diana, it's an uphill struggle. Now, you take as much cordial as you want. I must go and stir up the fire.
When Anne came back, Diana was drinking her second glassful, and offered no objection to the drinking of a third. The tumblerfuls were generous ones. For fully 5 minutes, Anne regaled Diana with culinary disasters that occurred during her cooking lessons. Suddenly, Diana stood up very unsteadily. Then she sat down again and put her hands to her head.
Why, Diana, what is the matter?
I'm awful sick. I must go home.
Oh, you mustn't dream of going home without your tea.
I must go home. I'm awful dizzy.
And indeed, she walked very dizzily. Anne went with her, then wept all the way back to Green Gables, where she sorrowfully put the remainder of the raspberry cordial back into the pantry. Monday afternoon, Marilla sent Anne down to Mrs. Lynde's on an errand. In a short space of time, Anne came flying back in tears.
Whatever has gone wrong now?
Mrs. Lynde saw Mrs. Barry today. She says I set Diana drunk on Saturday, that I must be a wicked little girl, and she's never going to let Diana play with me again.
Set Diana drunk? Anne, what on earth did you give her?
Nothing but raspberry cordial, but I didn't mean to get her drunk.
Drunk? Fiddlesticks.
Marilla marched to the sitting-room pantry. There on the shelf was a bottle she recognized as one containing some of her homemade currant wine. At the same time, she remembered she had put the raspberry cordial in the cellar, not the pantry, as she had told Anne. She went back to the kitchen and told Anne what had happened, and agreed to go and tell Mrs. Barry. Marilla returned from Orchard Slope, convinced that Mrs. Barry was the most unreasonable woman she had ever met, for she would not believe it was a mistake and would not forgive Anne. In desperation, Anne too went and spoke to Mrs. Barry, only to be told that she was not considered to be a fit little girl to associate with Diana, and to go home and behave herself. The following Monday, Anne surprised Marilla by coming down from her room with her basket of books on her arm and her lips primmed up into a line of determination.
I'm going back to school. That is all there's left in life for me, now that my friend has been ruthlessly torn from me. In school I can look at her and muse over days departed.
You'd better muse over your lessons and sums.
I'll try to be a model pupil.
Anne was welcomed back to school with open arms. She was showered with little gifts. Her greatest thrill was a bookmarker and a note passed in great secrecy to her from Diana. Anne flung herself into her studies, heart and soul, determined not to be outdone in any class by Gilbert Blythe. The rivalry between them was soon apparent. When the written examinations at the end of the month were held, the suspense was terrible. The first month, Gilbert came out 3 marks ahead. The second, Anne beat him by 5. By the end of the term, Anne and Gilbert were both promoted into the 5th class and allowed to begin studying Latin, geometry, French, and algebra. In geometry, however, Anne met her Waterloo.
It's perfectly awful stuff, Marilla. Even Diana gets along better than I do. It makes me very sad at times to think about her, but really, Marilla, one can't stay sad very long in such an interesting world, can one?
All things great are wound up with all things little. It might not seem that the decision of a Canadian premier to include Prince Edward Island in a political tour could have much to do with the fortunes of Anne Shirley. But it had. It was in January the premier came. On the night of the meeting, nearly all of the men and women of Avonlea had gone to Charlottetown. Mrs. Lynde went and took her husband and Marilla. Anne and Matthew had the cheerful kitchen of Green Gables to themselves. Anne went down to the cellar to get some russets. Just as she emerged with her plate of apples, the kitchen door was flung open and in rushed Diana.
Whatever's the matter, Diana?
Oh, Anne, do come quick. Minnie May is awful sick. She's got croup, and Mother and Father are away to town, and there's nobody to go for the doctor.
Don't worry now. I'll go.
Don't cry, Diana. I know exactly what to do for croup. Just wait till I get the ipecac. Come on now.
The two little girls hurried across the snow-crusted fields to Diana's house. Minnie May, aged 3, was really very sick. Young Mary Jo, the babysitter, was helpless and bewildered. Anne went to work with skill and promptness.
Minnie May has croup, all right. She's pretty bad. I'm going to give her a dose of ipecac.
Minnie May did not take kindly to the medicine, but Anne had not brought up 3 pairs of twins for nothing. Down that ipecac went. Then and many times during the long, anxious night, when the two little girls worked patiently over the suffering Minnie May. It was 3 o'clock when Matthew came with the doctor.
I was awfully near giving up in despair. I actually thought she was going to choke to death. I gave her every drop of ipecac, and when the last dose went down, I said to myself, this is the last lingering hope, and I fear 'tis a vain one. But in about 3 minutes, she coughed up the phlegm and began to get better right away. You must just imagine my relief, Doctor. You know there are some things that cannot be expressed in words.
The doctor nodded in agreement. He looked at Anne as if he were thinking some things about her that couldn't be expressed in words. Later on, however, he expressed them to Mr. and Mrs. Barry.
That little red-headed girl they have over at Cuthberts is as smart as they make 'em. I tell you, she saved that baby's life.
Anne declared herself too tired to be able to go to school. Matthew agreed. Anne accordingly went to bed, and it was well on in the afternoon when she descended to the kitchen where Marilla sat knitting.
Matthew has been telling me about last night. It was fortunate you knew what to do. Mrs. Barry was here earlier, Anne. She says you saved Minnie May's life, and she is very sorry she acted the way she did in that affair of the currant wine. She hopes you'll forgive her and be good friends with Diana again. You're to go over this evening, if you like.
Oh, Marilla, can I go right now?
Yes, run along.
Later, Anne came dancing home in the purple winter twilight, across the snowy places, having had a perfect afternoon.
You see before you a perfectly happy person, Marilla. Mrs. Barry kissed me and cried, and said she was so sorry she could never repay me and Diana, and I had a lovely afternoon. I assure you, Marilla, that I feel like praying tonight, and I'm going to think out a special brand new prayer in honor of the occasion.
It was 11 o'clock on the night of Diana's birthday when she and Anne arrived back at the Barry house from the Avonlea Debating Club concert. The invitation from Diana's mother for Anne to attend had included spending the night with Diana in the spare room, the prospect of which added ecstasy to excitement for Anne. The two girls tiptoed into the warm parlor and changed into their nightclothes.
Are you ready for bed, Diana? Let's run a race and see who'll get to bed first.
The suggestion appealed to Diana. The two little figures flew down the long room, through the spare room door, and bounded on the bed at the same moment. And then, something moved beneath them. There was a gasp and a cry, and somebody said in muffled accents,
"Merciful goodness!"
Oh, who was it? What was it? It was Aunt Josephine. However she came to be there. Oh, I know she'll be furious.
Who is your Aunt Josephine?
She's Father's aunt. She lives in Charlottetown. She's awfully old, 70 anyhow, and I don't believe she was ever a little girl. We were expecting her out for a visit, but not so soon.
Miss Josephine Barry did not appear at breakfast the next morning. Mrs. Barry smiled at the two little girls and told them that she had tried to stay awake until they returned, to tell them that Aunt Josephine had arrived earlier than expected. The girls both preserved a discreet silence. Anne hurried home after breakfast and remained in blissful ignorance of the disturbance in the Barry household until she went down to Mrs. Lynde's on an errand for Marilla.
Mrs. Barry tells me you and Diana nearly frightened poor old Miss Barry to death last night. She was in a terrible temper when she got up this morning. She wouldn't speak to Diana at all.
It wasn't Diana's fault. I suggested racing to see who would get into bed first.
I knew it. Well, it's made a nice lot of trouble. Old Miss Barry came out to stay for a month, but she declares she won't stay another day. She had promised to pay for music lessons for Diana, but not now.
When she left Mrs. Lynde's, Anne took her way across the fields to Orchard Slope. Diana met her at the kitchen door.
Your Aunt Josephine was very cross, wasn't she?
Yes, she was fairly dancing with rage.
Why didn't you say it was my fault?
I'm no telltale, Anne Shirley.
Well, I'm going to tell her myself.
Anne, you'd never. She'll eat you alive.
It was my fault, and I've got to confess.
Well, she's in the sitting room.
Come in. Who are you?
I'm Anne of Green Gables, and I've come to confess, if you please.
Confess what?
That it was all my fault about jumping into bed on you last night. Diana would never have thought of such a thing, so you must see how unjust it is to blame her, Miss Barry.
Oh, I must, eh? I rather think that Diana did her share of the jumping.
But we were only in fun. I think you ought to forgive us now we've apologized. Anyhow, please forgive Diana and let her have her music lessons.
I don't think it is any excuse that you were only in fun. You don't know what it is to be awakened by two great girls bouncing on you.
I don't know, but I can imagine. But then, there is our side of it, too. Have you any imagination, Miss Barry? If you have, just put yourself in our place. We didn't know there was anybody in that bed, and you nearly scared us to death.
Well, I'm afraid my imagination is a little rusty. Sit down here and tell me about yourself.
I'm very sorry I can't. I would like to, because you seem an interesting lady, but it is my duty to go home to Miss Cuthbert, the very kind lady who has taken me to bring up properly. She is doing her best, but it is very discouraging work. Before I go, I wish you would tell me if you will stay as long as you meant to in Avonlea.
I think perhaps I will, if you will come over and talk to me occasionally.
Miss Barry stayed her month out and over. She was a more agreeable guest than usual, for Anne kept her in good humor. They became firm friends. Anne had been at Green Gables for a year, when in June, Mr. Phillips announced that he was leaving the school. Despite the times he had been horrid and sarcastic, the opening words of his farewell speech, "The time has come for us to part," set all the girls off in floods of tears, including Anne. However, their misery was short-lived, for on their way home, they had the excitement of meeting the new minister and his wife at the station. They were a young, pleasant-faced couple, still on their honeymoon, and full of all good and beautiful enthusiasm for their chosen life work. Avonlea opened its heart to them from the start. With Mrs. Allen, Anne fell promptly and wholeheartedly in love. One Sunday afternoon, she announced to Marilla that Mrs. Allen was perfectly lovely. She had taken their Sunday school class and was a splendid teacher.
I suppose we must have Mr. and Mrs. Allen up to tea some day soon. Let me see. Next Wednesday would be a good time to have them.
Oh, Marilla, will you let me bake a cake for the occasion?
Yes, you can bake a layer cake.
Wednesday morning came. Anne got up at sunrise because she was too excited to sleep, and found she had caught a severe cold in the head. Undaunted, after breakfast she proceeded to make her cake. The cake came out of the oven light and feathery. Anne flushed with delight, and then set about persuading Marilla to let her decorate the table. She made that tea table such a thing of beauty that when the minister and his wife sat down to it, they exclaimed in chorus over its loveliness. All went merry as a marriage bell until Anne's layer cake was passed. Mrs. Allen, already full, declined it. But Marilla, seeing the disappointment on Anne's face, told her that Anne had made it on purpose for her, so she gracefully sampled it. No sooner had she taken a mouthful when a most peculiar expression crossed her face. Marilla saw the expression and hastened to taste the cake.
Anne Shirley, what on earth did you put into that cake?
Nothing but what the recipe said, Marilla.
Oh, it's simply horrible. Taste it yourself. What flavoring did you use?
Vanilla.
Go and bring me the bottle.
Here it is. You see, best vanilla.
Oh, mercy on us, Anne. You flavored the cake with anodyne liniment. I broke the liniment bottle last week and poured what was left into an old empty vanilla bottle. Oh, for pity's sake, why couldn't you have smelled it?
Anne protested that she couldn't smell anything because of her cold, then burst into tears and fairly fled to the gable chamber, where she cast herself on the bed and wept as one who refuses to be comforted. Presently, a light step sounded on the stairs, and somebody entered the room.
Oh, Marilla, I'm disgraced forever. I shall never be able to live this down. I cannot ever look Mrs. Allen in the face again. But the liniment isn't poisonous. Won't you tell Mrs. Allen so, Marilla?
Suppose you jump up and tell her yourself.
Oh, Mrs. Allen!
My dear little girl, you mustn't cry like this. Why, it's just a funny mistake that anybody might make.
Oh, I wanted to have that cake so nice for you.
Yes, I know, dear. And I assure you, I appreciate your kindness and thoughtfulness. Now, you mustn't cry any more, but come down with me and show me your flower garden.
Anne permitted herself to be led down and comforted, reflecting that it was really providential that Mrs. Allen was a kindred spirit. Shortly afterwards, a matter of days only, that kindred spirit returned the invitation and entertained Anne to tea at the manse. Anne got through her visit without any serious breach of etiquette, and arrived home full of happiness and news. Mrs. Lynde had arrived at the manse just before Anne left, and announced that the school trustees had hired a new teacher, a lady, Miss Muriel Stacey. Anne didn't know she could live through the 2 weeks before school began, so impatient was she to meet her. As things turned out, she had to wait somewhat longer. A week after tea at the manse, Diana Barry gave a party for the girls in her class. They had a very good time, and nothing untoward happened until after tea when they played daring in the garden. Carrie Sloane dared Ruby Gillis to climb a huge old willow tree. Then Josie Pye dared Jane Andrews to hop on her left leg around the garden. Jane tried but gave out at the third corner. Josie was a bit too triumphant, so Anne dared her walk along the top of the board fence which bounded the garden. To the reluctant admiration of all, she did so, with an airy unconcern, and darted a defiant glance at Anne. Anne was disdainful. She deemed walking along a little low-board fence nothing wonderful compared with a girl she knew in Maryville who could walk the ridgepole of a roof. Josie flatly refused to believe it, and declared that even if it was true, Anne certainly couldn't do such a thing. Anne rashly said she could, and was immediately dared by Josie to walk the ridgepole of the Barrys' kitchen roof.
Don't do it, Anne! You'll fall off and be killed!
I must do it. My honor is at stake. If I am killed, you are to have my pearl bead ring.
Anne climbed the ladder amid breathless silence, gained the ridgepole, and started to walk along it. She managed to take several steps before the catastrophe came. She swayed, lost her balance, and fell. The girls rushed to where she lay, white and limp.
Anne! Are you killed? Oh, Anne, speak just one word to me and tell me if you were killed.
No, Diana, I'm not killed, but I think I'm rendered unconscious. It's my ankle. Oh, Diana, please find your father and ask him to take me home. I know I can never walk there.
Marilla was out in the orchard when she saw Mr. Barry coming over the log bridge. In his arms he carried Anne, whose head lay limply against his shoulder. At that moment, Marilla had a revelation. She knew as she hurried down the slope that Anne was dearer to her than anything on earth. Matthew was straightway dispatched for the doctor, who in due time came to discover that the injury was more serious than they had supposed. Anne's ankle was broken. It was October when Anne was ready to go back to school. In the new teacher, she found another true and helpful friend. Miss Stacey was a bright, sympathetic young woman with the happy gift of winning and holding the affections of her pupils and bringing out the best that was in them, mentally and morally. Anne expanded like a flower under this wholesome influence. She loved the field afternoons, the recitation Fridays, and physical contortions, but all these paled before a project which Miss Stacey brought forward in November. This was that the scholars of Avonlea School should get up a concert and hold it in the hall on Christmas night, for the laudable purpose of helping to pay for a school house flag. Of the excited performers-elect, none was so excited as Anne Shirley, who threw herself into the undertaking, heart and soul.
We're going to have 6 choruses, and Diana is to sing a solo. I'm in 2 dialogues, and I'm to have 2 recitations, and we're to have a tableau, Faith, Hope, and Charity.
Oh.
I'm to be Hope with my hands clasped and my eyes uplifted. Oh, Marilla, don't you hope your little Anne will distinguish herself?
All I hope is that you'll behave yourself.
Matthew had come into the kitchen in the twilight of a cold gray December evening and had sat down to take off his boots, unconscious of the fact that Anne and a bevy of her schoolmates were having a rehearsal in the sitting room. Presently they came trooping into the kitchen, chattering gaily. They did not see Matthew, who shrank bashfully into the shadows. He watched them shyly as they put on their jackets. Anne stood among them, bright-eyed and animated as they. But Matthew suddenly became aware that there was something about her different from her mates, a difference that should not exist. Matthew was haunted by this question until, after 2 hours of hard reflection, he arrived at the solution to his question. Anne was not dressed like the other girls. The more Matthew thought about the matter, the more he was convinced that Anne never had been dressed like the other girls. Marilla kept her clothed in plain dark dresses. Of course it must be all right. Marilla knew best. But surely it would do no harm to let the child have one pretty dress. Matthew decided he would give her one. Christmas was only a fortnight off. A nice new dress for a present would be the very thing. The very next evening, Matthew betook himself to Carmody to buy the dress. It would be, he felt assured, no trifling ordeal. And so it proved. He could not overcome his shyness of women, and found himself quite incapable of explaining his wants to the lady counter-clerk. He returned home with 20 pounds of sugar, and no dress. When Matthew came to think the matter over, he decided that a woman was required to cope with the situation. Marilla was out of the question. Remained only Mrs. Lynde, for of no other woman in Avonlea would Matthew have dared to ask advice.
Pick out a dress for you to give Anne? To be sure I will. I believe a nice rich brown would just suit her. Perhaps you'd like me to make it up for her.
Well, no, I'm much obliged, and I don't know, but I'd like, I think they make the sleeves different nowadays to what they used to be. If it wouldn't be asking too much, I'd like them to be made in the new way.
Puffs? Of course. You needn't worry a speck more about it, Matthew.
When Mrs. Lynde brought up the new dress on Christmas Eve, Marilla behaved pretty well on the whole, but made it plain that she didn't consider Anne needed any more dresses. Christmas morning broke on a beautiful white world. Anne ran downstairs calling out Happy Christmases to Marilla and Matthew. Matthew sheepishly unfolded the dress from its paper and held it out.
Why, Matthew, is that for me? Oh, Matthew!
That's a Christmas present for you, Anne. What? Why, Anne, you're crying. Don't you like it? Well, now, I...
Like it? Oh, Matthew, it's perfectly exquisite. Oh, I can never thank you enough. Look at those sleeves. Oh, it seems to me this must be a happy dream.
There's a hair ribbon Mrs. Lynde left for you. It's brown to match the dress. Come now, let's have breakfast.
When breakfast was over, Diana appeared. Anne flew down the slope to meet her, to tell her about her dress. Diana handed her a box from Aunt Josephine. Anne opened the box and peeped in. First a card with, "For the Anne girl, and Merry Christmas," written on it. And then a pair of the daintiest little kid slippers. Anne's cup of joy was filled to overflowing. All the Avonlea scholars were in a fever of excitement that day. The concert came off in the evening and was a pronounced success. All the performers did excellently well, but Anne was the bright, particular star of the evening. That night, Marilla and Matthew sat for a while by the kitchen fire, after Anne had gone to bed, both of them pleased and proud of their little Anne, and thinking about her future. Junior Avonlea found it hard to settle down to humdrum existence again after the concert. Anne's imagination served to provide some interest by the formation of a story club. It was limited to Anne and Diana at first, but it was soon extended to include 3 or 4 other girls who felt that their imaginations needed cultivating. In late April, Anne learned a lesson she never forgot. One day, when in the house alone, a peddler called at the door. Looking in his box, she saw a bottle of hair dye, which the peddler assured her would dye her hair a beautiful raven black and wouldn't wash off. Certainly it wouldn't wash off, but instead of black, her hair turned green. Nothing that Anne or Marilla could do would remove the dye, and Marilla finally decided that the only thing to be done was to cut it all off. The result was not becoming, to state the case as mildly as may be. Anne's clipped head made a sensation in school, but to her relief, nobody guessed the real reason for it. Spring passed, summer came, and much to her delight, Anne's hair grew quite auburn. Anne, Diana, Ruby, and Jane were standing that midsummer afternoon on the bank of the pond, below Orchard Slope, on a little headland. At its tip was a small wooden platform. It was Anne's idea that they should dramatize Tennyson's poem, Elaine, and the plan was greeted with enthusiasm. The girls had discovered that if the little flat-bottomed dory Mr. Barry kept there were pushed off from the landing place, it would drift down with the current under the bridge, and finally strand itself on another headland lower down. Nothing could be more convenient for playing Elaine.
Oh, very well. I'll be Elaine, though I haven't got long golden hair. Ruby, you be King Arthur, Jane, Guinevere, and Diana must be Lancelot.
Now you lie flat in the bottom, Anne, and I'll cover you with this yellow scarf for the cloth of gold. Right. Now let's push the flat off.
The flat was pushed off, scraping roughly over an old embedded stake in the process. Diana, Jane, and Ruby scampered down to the lower headland, there to be in readiness to receive the Lily Maid. For a few minutes, Anne enjoyed the romance of the situation. Then the flat began to leak. That sharp stake at the landing had holed the flat. It did not take Anne long to realize she was in a dangerous plight. the flat would fill and sink. Anne did not lose her self-possession. If the flat floated close enough to one of the bridge piles, she could climb up on it. Her prayer was answered. The flat bumped right into a pile, and she scrambled up. And there she was, clinging to a slippery old pile, with no way of getting up or down. The flat drifted under the bridge, and then promptly sank in midstream. Ruby, Jane, and Diana saw it disappear, and had no doubt Anne had gone down with it. Shrieking at the tops of their voices, they started on a frantic run up through the woods. Anne heard their shrieks. Help would come soon. The minutes passed by. Why didn't somebody come? Then, just as she thought she could not endure the ache in her arm another moment, Gilbert Blythe came rowing under the bridge. He glanced up and saw her.
Anne Shirley! How on earth did you get up there? Come on, I'll help you down. What happened, Anne?
We were playing Elaine, and I had to drift down in the barge. It began to leak, and I climbed onto the pile. Will you be kind enough to row me to the landing?
Lucky thing I was out on the river.
Oh, I expect someone would have come along. I'm very much obliged to you.
Anne, look here. Can't we be good friends? I'm sorry I made fun of your hair and called you carrots. I only meant it as a joke. I think your hair is awfully pretty now. Honest, I do. Let's be friends.
No, I shall never be friends with you, Gilbert Blythe.
All right. I'll never ask you to be friends again, Anne Shirley.
Anne held her head up high, but she was conscious of an odd feeling of regret. Great was the consternation in the Barry and Cuthbert households when the events of the afternoon became known.
Will you ever have any sense, Anne?
Oh, yes. I think I will, Marilla.
I don't see how.
Well, I've learned a new and valuable lesson today. Ever since I came to Green Gables, I've been making mistakes, and each mistake had helped cure me of some great shortcoming. Today's mistake is going to cure me of being too romantic.
I'm sure I hope so.
But Matthew, who had been sitting mutely in his corner, laid a hand on Anne's shoulder when Marilla had gone out, and whispered shyly,
Don't give up all your romance, Anne. Keep a little of it.
Was bringing the cows home from the back pasture by way of Lover's Lane. It was a September evening, and all the gaps and clearings in the wood were brimmed up with ruby sunset light. She saw Diana coming through the gate into the Barry field.
Isn't this evening just like a purple dream, Diana?
It's a very fine evening, but oh, I have such news, Anne. Aunt Josephine wants you and me to go to town next Tuesday. Anne stopped with her for the exhibition. There.
Oh, Diana, do you really mean it? But I'm afraid Marilla won't let me go.
I'll tell you. We'll get Mother to ask her.
Marilla agreed to let Anne go to town, and it was arranged that Mr. Barry should take the girls in on the following Tuesday. It was a long drive, but Anne and Diana enjoyed every minute of it. Miss Barry met them at the door with a twinkle in her sharp black eyes.
So, you've come to see me at last, you Anne girl. Oh, mercy, child, how you've grown. And you're so much better looking than you used to be. But I dare say you know that without being told.
Indeed I didn't. I know I'm not so freckled as I used to be, but I really hadn't dared to hope there was any other improvement. I'm so glad you think there is, Miss Barry.
Their sojourn in town was something that Anne and Diana dated from for years. From first to last, it was crowded with delights. On Wednesday, Miss Barry took them to the exhibition grounds and kept them there all day. Thursday, the girls had a drive in the park, and in the evening Miss Barry took them to a concert in the Academy of Music, where a noted prima donna was to sing. To Anne, the evening was a glittering vision of delight. Friday brought going home time, and Mr. Barry drove in for the girls.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed yourselves.
Indeed we have.
And you, Anne girl?
I've enjoyed every minute of...
With that, Anne threw her arms impulsively about the old woman's neck and kissed her wrinkled cheek. Miss Barry was pleased, and went back into her house with a sigh, saying to herself, "I thought Marilla Cuthbert was an old fool when I heard she adopted a girl out of an orphan asylum, but I guess she didn't make much of a mistake after all." Anne and Diana found the drive home as pleasant as the drive in. When she crossed the log bridge over the brook, Anne ran blithely up the hill and into the kitchen, where a hot supper was waiting on the table. After supper, Anne sat before the fire between Matthew and Marilla and gave them a full account of the visit. It was nearly dark, for the dull November twilight had fallen, and the only light in the kitchen came from the stove. Anne was curled up on the hearth rug. Marilla laid her knitting on her lap.
Anne, Miss Stacey was here this afternoon.
Was she? Oh, I'm so sorry I wasn't in. Why was she here?
She was talking about you. She wants to organize a class amongst her advanced students who mean to study for the entrance examination into Queen's. She came to ask Matthew and me if we would like you to join it. Would you like to go to Queen's and pass for a teacher?
Oh, Marilla, it's been the dream of my life. But won't it be dreadfully expensive?
I guess you needn't worry about that part of it. When Matthew and I took you to bring up, we resolved to give you a good education. So, you can join the Queen's class if you like, Anne.
Oh, Marilla, thank you. I'll study as hard as I can and do my very best to be a credit to you.
I dare say you'll get along well enough. Miss Stacey says you're bright and diligent.
The Queen's class was organized in due time. Gilbert Blythe, Anne Shirley, Ruby Gillis, Jane Andrews, Josie Pye, Charlie Sloane, and Moody Spurgeon McPherson joined it. Diana Barry did not, as her parents did not intend to send her to Queen's. This seemed nothing short of a calamity to Anne. There was open rivalry between Gilbert and Anne now, and Gilbert was as determined to be first in the class as Anne was. He was a foe worthy of her steel, and he completely ignored her. All at once, she found that she had forgiven and forgotten without knowing it, but it was too late. Otherwise, the winter passed away in a round of pleasant duties and studies. Spring came and went, and teacher and taught were alike glad when the term ended. When Anne got home that night, she stacked all her textbooks away in a trunk and locked it, determined not to look at a schoolbook during the vacation. Anne had the golden summer of her life. When September came, she was bright-eyed and alert, ready to study with might and main. Miss Stacey came back to Avonlea School and found all her pupils eager for work. It was a jolly, busy, happy, swift-flying winter. Schoolwork was as interesting, class rivalry as absorbing as of yore. Between times, Anne grew, shooting up so rapidly that Marilla was astonished one day to find the girl was taller than herself. Marilla felt a queer regret over Anne's inches. The girl she had learned to love had vanished somehow, and here was this tall, serious-eyed girl of 15. There were other changes in Anne, no less real than the physical change. For one thing, she became much quieter. Marilla noticed this also.
You don't chatter half as much as you used to, Anne, nor use half as many big words. What has come over you?
I don't know. I don't want to talk so much. And somehow I don't want to use big words anymore. Besides, Miss Stacey says the short ones are stronger and better.
You've only got 2 months before the entrance. Do you think you'll get through?
I don't know. Sometimes I wake in the night and wonder what I'll do if I don't pass.
Why, go to school next year and try again.
With the end of June came the close of the term, and the close of Miss Stacey's rule in Avonlea's school. Anne and Diana walked home that evening, feeling very sober indeed. Anne went to town the following Monday for the entrance examination and stayed with Diana's Aunt Josephine. The geometry examination and all the others were over in due time, and Anne arrived home on Friday evening, rather tired, but with an air of chastened triumph about her. Diana was at Green Gables when she arrived, and they met as if they had been parted for years.
You old darling. It's perfectly splendid to see you back again. Oh, Anne, how did you get along?
Pretty well, I think, but we won't know until the pass list is out, and that won't be for a fortnight.
Oh, you'll pass all right. Don't worry.
At the end of the fortnight, Anne took to haunting the post office. When 3 weeks had gone by without the pass list appearing, Anne began to feel she really couldn't stand the strain much longer. But one evening the news came. Anne was sitting at her open window when she saw Diana come flying up the slope with a fluttering newspaper in her hand.
Anne, you've passed. Passed the very first. You and Gilbert both. Your ties. But your name is first. Oh, I'm so proud.
Anne snatched the newspaper. Yes, she had passed. There was her name at the very top of a list of 200. Her first thought was to run out to the field and tell Matthew, then go up the road and tell the others. As luck would have it, Mrs. Lynde was talking to Marilla at the lane fence.
Oh, Matthew, I've passed and I'm first. Or one of the first.
Well, now. Well, I always said it. I knew you could beat them all easy.
You've done pretty well, I must say, Anne.
I just guess she has done well. You're a credit to your friends, Anne, that's what. And we're all proud of you.
The next weeks were busy ones at Green Gables, for Anne was getting ready to go to Queen's. Anne's outfit was ample and pretty, for Matthew saw to that, and Marilla for once made no objections whatever to anything he suggested. The day finally came when Anne must go to town. She and Matthew drove in one fine September morning, and when Anne had gone, Marilla plunged fiercely into unnecessary work with the bitterest kind of heartache. Anne and the rest of the Avonlea scholars reached town just in time to hurry off to the academy. Anne intended taking up the second-year work, being advised to do so by Miss Stacey. Gilbert Blythe elected to do the same. This meant getting a first-class teacher's license in 1 year instead of 2. Anne felt so lonesome and homesick that first night in her hall bedroom that she felt quite joyful when Josie Pye suddenly appeared. As a part of Avonlea life, even a pie was welcome. Soon after, Jane and Ruby came into her room, and Ruby wanted to know if Anne meant to try for the gold medal. Anne blushed and admitted that she was thinking of it. That talk of awards reminded Josie of something she had learned that day. Queen's was to get one of the Avery scholarships. An Avery scholarship! Anne felt her heart beat more quickly. Before Josie's news, Anne's highest pinnacle had been a teacher's license and perhaps the medal. But now, in one moment, Anne saw herself winning the Avery Scholarship in English, taking an arts course at Redmond, and graduating in gown and mortarboard. $250 a year for 4 years at Redmond College. No wonder that Anne went to bed that night with tingling cheeks. Anne's homesickness wore off, greatly helped in the wearing by weekend visits home, as long as the open weather lasted. In the academy, Anne gradually drew a little circle of friends about her, thoughtful, ambitious students like herself. After the Christmas holidays, the Avonlea students gave up going home on Fridays and settled down to work. Anne worked hard and steadily. Her rivalry with Gilbert was as intense as it had ever been at Avonlea School, but somehow the bitterness had gone out of it. In spite of lessons, the students found opportunities for pleasant times. Anne spent many of her spare hours at Beechwood with Miss Barry, who often thought to herself, "That Anne girl improves all the time." Then, almost before anybody realized it, spring had come. The term was nearly over, and exams looming the next week. Anne, with her elbows on the windowsill, looked out unheedingly across city roof and spire and wove her dreams. All the beyond was hers, with its possibilities lurking rosily in the oncoming years. On the morning when the final results of all the examinations were to be posted on the bulletin board at Queen's, Anne was pale and quiet. As she went up the entrance steps to Queen's, she found the hall full of boys yelling, "Hooray for Blythe! Medalists!" So she had failed, and Gilbert had won. And then somebody called out, "Three cheers for Miss Shirley, winner of the Avery!" Anne was soon the center of a laughing, congratulating group. Commencement a few days later was the next important happening, when addresses were given and the public award of diplomas, prizes, and medals made. Matthew and Marilla were there, with eyes and ears for only one student on the platform, a tall girl in pale green, who read the best essay and was pointed out as the Avery winner.
Reckon you're glad we kept her, Marilla?
It's not the first time I've been glad. You do like to rub things in, Matthew Cuthbert.
Anne went home to Avonlea with Matthew and Marilla that evening. Diana was at Green Gables to meet her.
Oh, Diana, it's so good to be back again.
You've done splendidly, Anne. I suppose you won't be teaching now that you've won the Avery?
No, I'm going to Redmond in September. Jane and Ruby are going to teach.
Gilbert Blythe is going to teach too. His father can't afford to send him to college. I expect he'll get to school here.
The next morning at breakfast, it suddenly struck Anne that Matthew was not looking well. When he had gone out, she questioned Marilla.
Marilla, is Matthew quite well?
No, he isn't. He's had some real bad spells with his heart this spring. I've been real worried about him.
You're not looking as well yourself, Marilla. I'm afraid you've been working too hard.
It's not the work. It's my head. I've a pain so often now. Behind my eyes. Dr. Spencer says I must see an oculist. Well, Anne, you've done real well at Queen's. Mrs. Lynde says she don't believe in higher education for women, but I don't agree. Speaking of Rachel, reminds me, did you hear anything about the Abbey Bank lately?
I heard that it was shaky. Why?
That's what Rachel said. Matthew felt real worried. All we have saved is in that bank. When Rachel told us, I wanted Matthew to draw our money right out, but Mr. Russell told him the bank was all right.
That evening, Anne went with Matthew for the cows. Matthew walked slowly, with bent head.
You've been working too hard, Matthew. Why don't you take things easier?
Well, no, I can't seem to. It's only that I'm getting old, Anne.
If I had been the boy you sent for, I'd be able to help you so much now.
Well, now, I'd rather have you than a dozen boys, Anne. It was my girl that took the Avery Scholarship. My girl that I'm proud of.
He smiled his shy smile at her as he went into the yard. Anne took the memory of it when she went to her room that night. It was the last night before sorrow touched her life. The next day, Anne came through the hall to see Matthew standing in the porch doorway, his face strangely drawn and gray. Anne sprang across the kitchen to him at the same moment as Marilla. They were both too late. Before they could reach him, Matthew had fallen. Marilla sent Anne to tell Martin, the hired man, to fetch the doctor. On his way, he called at Orchard Slope, where Mrs. Lynde was visiting, and she and Mr. and Mrs. Barry hurried over. They found Anne and Marilla trying to restore Matthew to consciousness. Mrs. Lynde pushed them gently aside and tried his pulse. "Oh, Marilla, I don't think we can do anything for him."
Mrs. Lynde, you don't think Matthew is...
"Child, yes. I'm afraid of it." When the doctor came, he said that death had been instantaneous, probably caused by a sudden shock. The secret of the shock was discovered in the paper Matthew had held. The failure of the Abbey Bank. When the calm night came softly down over Green Gables, the old house was hushed and tranquil. Anne hoped that tears would come in solitude. It seemed to her to be a terrible thing that she could not shed a tear for Matthew, whom she had loved so much. In the night she awakened, and the recollection of the day came over her like a wave of sorrow. She could see Matthew's face smiling at her, as he had smiled when they parted at the gate that last evening. Then the tears came, and Anne wept her heart out. Marilla heard her and crept in to comfort her.
There, there. Don't cry so, dearie. Oh, it can't bring him back.
Oh, just let me cry, Marilla. Stay here for a little while with me, and keep your arm around me. Oh, Marilla, what will we do without him?
We've got each other, Anne. I don't know what I'd have done if you weren't here. Oh, Anne, I know I've been kind of strict and harsh with you, but you mustn't think I didn't love you as well as Matthew did, for all that. I want to tell you while I can, I love you as dear as if you were my own flesh and blood, and you've been my joy and comfort ever since you came to Green Gables.
2 days afterwards, they carried Matthew Cuthbert over his homestead threshold and away from the fields he had tilled and the orchards he had loved and the trees he had planted. Anne spent one evening at the manse, and when she got back to Green Gables, Marilla was sitting on the front doorsteps.
Dr. Spencer was here while you were away. He says that the specialist will be in town tomorrow, and I must go and have my eyes examined.
Marilla went to town the next day and returned in the evening. Anne found her in the kitchen.
Did you see the oculist? What did he say?
Yes, I saw him. He says if I give up all reading and sewing, don't cry, and wear the glasses he's given me, he thinks my eyes may not get any worse. But if I don't, he says I'll be stone blind in 6 months. Blind, Anne. Just think of it.
Marilla, don't think of it. You know he has given you hope.
I don't call it much hope. What am I to live for if I can't read or sew?
One afternoon, a few days later, Marilla came slowly in from the yard, where she had been talking to a caller.
What did Mr. Sadler want, Marilla?
He heard that I was going to sell Green Gables, and he wants to buy it.
Buy Green Gables? Oh, Marilla, you don't mean to sell Green Gables?
Anne, I don't know what else is to be done.
You mustn't sell Green Gables!
Oh, Anne, I wish I didn't have to, but I can't stay here alone.
You won't have to stay here alone, Marilla. I'll be with you. I'm not going to Redmond.
Not going to Redmond? What do you mean?
Just what I say. I've been thinking and planning. Mr. Barry wants to rent the farm, and I'm going to teach. I've applied for the school here, but I don't expect to get it, for I understand the trustees have promised it to Gilbert Blythe. But I can have Carmody School. Oh, I have it all planned out, Marilla. We'll be real cozy and happy here together, you and I.
Oh, Anne, I can't let you sacrifice yourself for me.
Nonsense! There is no sacrifice. Nothing could be worse than giving up Green Gables.
Oh, you blessed girl. I feel as if you've given me a new life.
When it became noised abroad in Avonlea that Anne had given up the idea of going to college, most folks, not knowing about Marilla's eyes, thought she was foolish. Mrs. Lynde did not. She came up one evening and found Marilla and Anne sitting at the front door.
Well, Anne, I hear you've given up your notion of going to college. I was real glad to hear it. You've got enough education now.
But I'm going to study here, and I'm going to teach over at Carmody, you know.
I don't know it. You're going to teach right here in Avonlea. The trustees have decided to give you the school.
I thought they had promised it to Gilbert Blythe.
So they did. But as soon as Gilbert heard you had applied for it, he went to them and withdrew his application and suggested that they accept yours.
I don't feel I ought to take it. I mean, I don't think I ought to let Gilbert make such a sacrifice for me.
I guess you can't prevent him now. He signed papers with the White Sands trustees.
Next evening, Anne went to the little Avonlea graveyard to put fresh flowers on Matthew's grave. When she left it and walked down the hill, she saw Gilbert. Anne stopped and held out her hand.
Gilbert, I want to thank you for giving up the school for me. It was very good of you.
I was pleased to be able to do you some small service. Are we going to be friends after this? Have you really forgiven me my old fault?
I forgave you that day by the pond landing, although I didn't know it. I've been sorry ever since.
We are going to be the best of friends. We were born to be good friends, Anne. Come, I'm going to walk home with you.
Anne sat at her window that night, companioned by a glad content. Her horizons had closed in since that night she had sat there after coming home from Queens. But if the path set before her feet was to be narrow, she knew that the flowers of quiet happiness would bloom along it. She whispered softly to herself, "God's in his heaven. All's right with the world."
If you've enjoyed this story, be sure to listen to other titles in the series, including A Little Princess, The Secret Garden, and The Railway Children.